Hello everyone, this is a video on reproduction in organism cbse part 8 of chapter 1 reproduction in organisms. So far in my previous video I explained you about reproduction, then I told about asexual and sexual reproduction. In this video I am going to explain what are the processes that takes place in a sexual reproduction, or what are the steps that go in a sexual reproduction. So first we need to understand that what is fertilization. When we say fertilization, it is actual fusion of male and female gamete. So all the events that occur before fertilization are known as pre-fertilization events, and all the events after fertilization are known as post-fertilization events. We can also call fertilization as syngamy. Now, before fertilization, there are two main steps that need to take place. Number one is gametogenesis, that is the production of gametes, and second is gamete transfer. That means that once the gametes are formed, they need to come closer to each other so that they can fertilize. Post-fertilization events includes two processes. First is embryogenesis and development of zygote. Now, once fertilization takes place, the male and female gamete will fuse and will form a zygote. That zygote will be diploid. In my previous videos, I explained why a zygote is diploid. Okay. So when a zygote is formed, it needs to develop. So the development of zygote takes place. It multiplies in number, grows on and forms an embryo. Now this embryo further grows, and the process of growing of embryo is known as embryogenesis. Now first we will have a look on gametogenesis. So as I said that the process of formation of gamete is called gametogenesis, and the gametes are always haploid. So the cells which produce gametes are known as meiocytes, and they go meiosis, that is reduction or division, to form gametes. Now we can divide gametes on the basis of morphology into two categories: homogametes and heterogametes. The gametes which look similar morphologically are known as homogametes, whereas the gametes which look dissimilar morphologically are known as heterogametes. Okay, as we can say that in homogametes they are morphologically similar, so we cannot distinguish them into male and female, while in heterogametes they are not morphologically similar, so we can divide them into male and female. Like in human beings also, we have a sperm and an ovum. Ovum is in round shape, while sperms are not at that shape, so we can divide them into male and female. Here are some of the examples of gametes. Now in the A part you can see that they are homogametes. They are morphologically almost similar. Both bear flagella, that is both are motile, and their round structures where the nucleus is there is also same. So they are homogametes. In the B part you can see that they are different. One is bigger in size while the other is smaller in size, and even in C you can see that is an example of humans. The ovum is larger while the sperms are very small, right? Now as I said earlier that meiocytes are the cell which produce gametes. So on the basis of the stage at which meiosis occurs, we can divide meiosis into three categories. Number one is zygotic meiosis. In this, once a zygote is formed, that is the male and the female gametes will fuse, and then the meiosis will occur in zygote. So here the meiocyte is our zygote. Number two comes sporic meiosis. In this, there is a structure sporangia which produces spores. Now spores produced are haploid, so therefore the sporangia act as an meiocyte in this case. Now once the spores are formed through sporangia, they will develop and form gametophytes. Gametophytes are the structures which will further produce gametes. Now as gametophytes are haploid in nature, because as I said that the sporangia will produce haploid spores, so spores are haploid, so they will produce a haploid gametophyte. Therefore the gametophytes will produce haploid gametes through mitosis. ठीक है. Next comes gametic meiosis. In this what happens, the germinal cells that are diploid in nature will act as a meiocyte. They will undergo meiosis and produce haploid gametes. Most of the animals have this process, gametic meiosis. Through this diagram, you can understand how does the zygotic meiosis takes place. So we can start with haploid thallus. Haploid thallus means body. So from an organism we can start. So when a haploid organism that is having n number of chromosomes will produce gametangia. Okay, gametangia are the structure which will further produce gametes. So gametangia are also having n number of chromosomes. Now they will produce gametes. Once the gametes are produced, both the gametes, one from one parent and one from the another parent, will combine, that is they will fertilize and form a zygote. Now both the gametes were having n and n number of chromosomes, so n plus n is equals to 2n. So zygote will have 2n number of chromosomes. Now the zygote will go meiosis. When the zygote will go meiosis, haploid cells will be produced that will have n number of cells. Then finally these cells will produce a haploid thallus. A haploid thallus means a new organism. Here you can understand a sporic meiosis. We can start from a diploid generation. Diploid generation means an organism which is having 2n number of chromosomes. Now what will this do? It will produce sporangia. Now sporangia will also have 2n number of chromosomes. Now they will undergo meiosis and will produce spores. Now as I said that the sporangia produces haploid spores. So spores will have n number of chromosomes. Now these spores will produce gametophytes. Gametophytes means an organism which is having n number of chromosomes. So after this, what this gametophyte do? It will produce gametangia, which will also have n number of chromosome. Now this gametangia will further produce gametes that will also have n number of chromosome. Now when fertilization of gametes takes place, a zygote will form having 2n number of chromosomes. Now this zygote will further develop and produce a sporophyte that will have a 2n number of chromosome. That means again a diploid generation will be formed. Like this the cycles continue. Now we come to gametic meiosis. Here we can start from diploid thallus. Diploid thallus means a diploid organism having 2n number of chromosome. Now this diploid organism will produce gametangia that will have 2n number of chromosome. Now gametangia will undergo meiosis and produce gametes of n number of chromosome. Now these gametes will join, that is they will fertilize and produce a zygote of 2n number of chromosome. Again it will produce an organism that is a diploid thallus and cycle will continue. Here in this table you can see I have given the name of some organisms and the chromosome number in their gametes and in their meiocytes. Now meiocytes are the cells which produce gametes. So meiocytes undergo meiosis. So the meiocytes will have 2n number of chromosomes while the gametes will have n number of chromosomes. In human beings you can see there are 46 number of chromosomes in meiocytes while in gametes they only have 23. In butterfly you can see there are 380 number of chromosomes in meiocytes while in gametes they only have 190 number of chromosomes. Now as I said that in pre-fertilization events there are two processes. Number one was gametogenesis, that was production of gametes, and the second one is gamete transfer. Gamete transfer means that both the male and the female gamete will come together so that they can go through fertilization. Now usually what happens, the male gamete travels to female gametes. Now when it travels to female gamete, in the way many of the male gametes get destroyed. So if most of them will get destroyed, then fertilization rate will decrease. So to increase the rate of this fertilization, the male gametes are formed in large number. Why they are formed in large number? So that at least some of the male gametes will reach the female gamete. Like for example, there is only one ovum present, right? But the male gametes are produced in millions. So what will happen? Many of them will get destroyed in the way reaching the ovum, but at least some of the hundreds will reach them, and obviously one has to fertilize, so at least one can reach the female gamete, right? So now one term comes, that is pollination. Now what does pollination means? It is in the case of plants, right? So pollination means the transfer of pollen grains. Now pollen grains are the male reproductive cells of the plant. So the transfer of the pollen grains from anther to stigma of a female organ is known as pollination. Now, as I said that the pollen grains are the male reproductive cells, right? So they are the sperms, or you can say they are the embryozoids of the plants. And anther, it is the male reproductive organ. Like in humans we have testes, so in plants we have anthers. Stigma is a female reproductive organ. As in humans we have ovaries, so in plants we have carpel, on which one of the part is stigma, right? So the transfer of the male cells to the female reproductive organ is known as pollination. Many of the animals usually have copulatory organ. Copulatory organs means these are the organs which help the male gamete to get transferred to the female reproductive organ. Now, pollination can be of three types. First is self-pollination, or what we call is autogamy. Now, what happens in self-pollination? If, for example, there is a flower which is having both male and female gamete, so what will happen? The male gametes of the same flower will get transferred to the female gamete of the same flower. So the pollination that occurs in a same flower, or you can say in a one flower, is known as autogamy or self-pollination. Next comes another form of self-pollination, that is genetogamy. Now what happens in genetogamy? That, for example, there is a plant, it bears many flowers. So what will happen? That the male gamete of one flower will get transferred to the female gamete of another flower. The flowers will be two, but the plant will be same. So this is known as genetogamy. Next comes cross pollination, or what we call is xenogamy. Now what happens in cross pollination? There will be two plants, and the male gamete of one plant will get transferred to the female gamete of another plant. So this is known as cross pollination. And usually cross pollination needs an agent. Agent means a medium through which the male gamete will get transferred to the female gamete. It can be any. It may be a physical agent, for example wind, water, or it can be a biological agent like a bee, an insect, or any other animal. Here I have given a diagram of self-pollination. In this you can see that there are anthers, that are the male reproductive organs, and there is a stigma, that is the female reproductive organ. So what will happen? The anthers will get transferred to the stigma of the same flower. So this is known as self-pollination. Here you can see genetogamy. It is also a type of self-pollination. Why? Because here there will be only one plant, but the flowers will be different. So the male gamete of one flower will get transferred to the female gamete of another flower. The flowers will be two, but the plant will be same. Now here you can see cross pollination. In this there are two separate flowers of two separate plants, right? So the male gamete of one flower is getting transferred to the female gamete of another flower. So this is known as cross pollination. Now we are over with the pre-fertilization events, that were gametogenesis and gamete transfer. Now once the gametes has come closer to each other, now they need to fertilize. So the next process, or the second step in sexual reproduction, is fertilization. As I earlier said, that fertilization means the fusion of male and female gamete. Now it can be of two types: external fertilization and internal fertilization. If fertilization is taking place within the body of an organism, it is known as internal fertilization. But if the fertilization is taking place outside the body of an organism, then it is known as external fertilization. We can also call it external syngamy and internal syngamy. So, if we talk about external fertilization, it usually takes place in aquatic animals. This is because external fertilization needs a medium, and water acts as a good medium for fertilization of the gametes, right? Now, in this case, both the male and the female gametes are produced in large number, so that the fertilization rate increases. If they will be in less number, then it's not sure that they will fertilize or non-fertilize, because in water they may get drifted from each other, they may move away, so they will not get fertilized. So they are produced in so large number that at least some of the gametes will fertilize with each other. Now, in external fertilization, as the fertilization is taking outside the body of an organism, the gametes or the zygote that will be formed are usually not protected. So, predators can easily eat them. So, therefore, the survival rate in external fertilization is very low. Now, if we talk about internal fertilization, it is usually in terrestrial organism. This is because they don't have any medium so that their gametes can fertilize. So they have to fertilize their gametes within their own body. Now here the eggs or the female reproductive cells are very few, while the male reproductive are very large, so that when the male gametes get transferred to the female gamete, they are not killed or they are not destroyed in the way, right? Male gametes are usually mobile. Mobile means they are motile, while eggs are non-motile. That is, they do not bear any motion. Here you can see the external fertilization in the case of a fish. Both the male and the female fish is releasing their eggs and sperm so that they can fertilize with each other. This is a case of internal fertilization. This you can see where fertilization is written. In this, the sperm and ovum are getting fertilized, but this process takes place within the human body. It is a case of human body, so the fertilization will take place within the female body, and then both the nuclei will join and a zygote will be formed. Now we will discuss about the post-fertilization events. These are the events or stages which takes place after fertilization. Now, once fertilization has taken place, zygote will be formed. Now, this zygote can develop in three ways. According to that, we can divide the life cycles of organism into three types: haplontic life cycle, diplontic life cycle, and diplohaplontic life cycle. Now, what happens in haplontic life cycle? Once there is a zygote is formed, it will develop a thick wall and form a spore. Now we will call this spore as zygospore. Now what will the zygospore do? It will stay dormant for some time and then develop in favorable conditions. So this life cycle is known as haplontic life cycle. Then comes diplontic life cycle. In this, what happens once the zygote is formed? It will do mitosis. This means equational division will take place. It will rapidly increase and develop an embryo, and this embryo will give rise to a new individual. The third one is diplohaplontic life cycle. Now what happens in this cycle? Once a zygote is formed, it will form an embryo, and now what this embryo will do? It will make diploid sporophytes. Diploid sporophytes means it will make a body having diploid cells. The sporophyte is the name of the individual which will be formed by an embryo. Now this sporophyte will act as sporangia. I already told the structures which made spores are known as sporangia. So sporophytes will act as sporangia, will go through meiosis and produce haploid spores. Now these spores will again form gametes. Gametes will again form zygote, and like this the cycle will go on. Now by these three diagrams we can very well explain the three types of cycles or life cycles that take place in organism. In first haplontic life cycle, you can see that the adult where it is written, it is having n number of chromosome. N number of chromosome means it is haploid. So the major part or the majority of the life cycle is covered by a haploid structure. So the adult is a haploid. Now it will produce haploid gametes. Now the gametes are haploid, so they will have n and n number of chromosome. Now when fertilization will take place, n plus n is equals to 2n number of zygote will be formed. Now this zygote will further do meiosis and form spores. Now when meiosis will take place, the spores produced will be haploid. These haploid spores will again form the adult. So you can see that the majority of the structures, the gametes, the spores and the adult, all the three are haploid, while only the zygote is a diploid. So this type of life cycle is known as haplontic life cycle. Now just come at the end and the last diagram where diplontic life cycle is written. Here you can see that the adult is an diploid, that is it is having 2n number of chromosome. Now what this adult is doing, it is going through meiosis and producing gametes. Now as it is going through meiosis, so the gametes which will be formed will be n, will have n number of chromosomes. So now when these will combine, they will do fertilization, they will form a zygote. Now as n and n will combine, it will result in a diploid zygote. So diploid zygote will again form the adult. So here also you can see that adult and the zygote, the major structures are having diploid body, that is 2n number of chromosome, while only the gametes are having haploid structures, that is only gametes are haploid. So therefore this type of life cycle is known as diplontic life cycle. Now we come to third type of life cycle, that is called alternation of generation or haplodiplontic life cycle. Now what does this means? That here the diploid and the haploid stages will be equal. Like in haplontic life cycle, we saw that only one structure was diploid and all other were haploid. So we called it as haploid life cycle. Then we saw in diplontic life cycle that only the gametes were haploid and all the other structures were diploid. So we called it as the diplontic life cycle. Now in alternation of generation, what happens that the number of structures having diploid and haploid structures are equal. How they are equal, we will see. We can start from gametophyte. Gametophyte is having n number of chromosome. It is an organism, right? So what is this organism doing? It is producing gametes. Now gametes will also have n number of chromosome. Now when the gametes will fertilize, they will produce a 2n number of zygote, that is they will produce a diploid zygote. Now this diploid zygote will produce sporophyte, that is another organism which will have the 2n number of chromosome. Now this sporophyte will do meiosis and will produce spores. Now because meiosis is taking place, so the spores formed will be haploid. Now these haploid structures, that is spores, will give rise to a gametophyte. So you can see that in one generation we are having gametophyte, then gametophytes are giving birth to sporophyte, then sporophytes are giving birth to gametophyte. So the generation are alternating. Alternating means one generation is haploid, then diploid, then haploid, then again diploid. So this way the cycle is going on. So that's why we call it alternation of generation. Now after once the zygote has developed, now the next steps comes embryogenesis. Embryogenesis means development of embryo. Now two main steps takes place in embryogenesis. First is mitotic cell division and the another one is cell differentiation. Now if we take the case of a human being, if we take that human zygote is there and the zygote has divided and formed an embryo. Now what will the embryo do? It starting differentiating means it will start taking their own functions, like some of the cells in the embryo will become the cells of heart, whereas some cells will become the cells of kidney, some will become nervous cells, that are the cells of brain. So like this, the different cells will start taking up different functions. Now on the basis of embryogenesis, we can divide animals into three categories. Number one is oviparous animals. Oviparous animals are animals which fertilize their egg, that is they fertilize. Once fertilization is taken place, once the zygote is formed, now they will leave the zygote in the environment. They are not going to take care of that zygote within their body, so they lay eggs. Now eggs are actually the zygotes. Now these zygotes or the eggs are covered by calcareous cells. It means they are covered by shells made up of calcium. This is because so that they are protected from external environment. Now when they lay eggs, the egg or the zygote develops within that egg, and once it is fully matured, the young ones hatch out of that egg. Next category is viviparous. Now what does viviparous animals do? Here, once a zygote is formed, now the female keeps the zygote within its body and it will nourish it till the time the new young one is formed. In humans also this happens. Next comes oviviviparous. In this what happens? Once a zygote is formed, the egg or the zygote will stay within the female body, but the female is not going to nourish it. That is, the embryo will develop within female body, but the female will not nourish it. Here I have written some examples of all the three types. In oviparous we can see reptiles and birds. In viviparous we can see mammals like dogs, cats, humans, etc. In oviviparous we have sharks and rattlesnake. Here in this picture you can see three oviparous animals: snapping turtle, alligator and chicken. Their eggs are also shown. Here are some pictures of viviparous animals like cow, cat, dog, giraffe, monkey and donkey. These are the oviviviparous animals. Oviviviparous are the animals which forms the zygote within the female body, but the female body will not nourish that zygote till it will form an embryo. Now I talked about the animals. How does the embryogenesis takes place in animal? Now we will talk how embryogenesis takes place in flowering plants. Now what happens in flowering plants? Once the zygote is formed, it is obvious that it will be formed within the female sex organs, because once pollination takes place, the pollen grains enters the female sex organ, that is pistil or what we call is carpel, and the fertilization takes place within the ovary. So once the zygote is formed in the ovary, all the accessory organs, that were the petals, sepals and even the male reproductive part, will shed off from the flower, and only the pistil or the female sex organ will remain. Now the zygote which is formed will grow into embryo, and this embryo will finally form a seed. The ovary that is left in the flower will form the walls of that seed, or what we call is the walls of the fruit, that is called pericarp. Now once the pericarp and the seed is formed, now we collectively call the pericarp and the seed as a fruit. Here is the diagram of an apple. Here you can see in the middle we have seed, then we have pericarp. Here three layers of pericarp is given. These were actually the layers of ovary which has now developed into fruit. Now for so long we talked about sexual reproduction, where the male and the female gametes were fusing. But there is also one alternative on sexual reproduction, that is parthenogenesis. It is not similar to asexual reproduction, but it is different. Here the gamete is formed, the female gamete, that is the egg or the ovum, is formed, but it is not fertilized with the male gamete. Without fertilization, it develops a new organism. Here are given so many examples of invertebrates and vertebrates where parthenogenesis takes place. These are two types of organisms in which parthenogenesis takes place. The above one is apus, which is an invertebrate, and the next one is an American lizard, which is an vertebrate. Now here in this diagram you can see how reproduction takes place in bee. Now it is wonderful to know that we have three types of bees. That is workers, that are having 2 n number of chromosomes, but they are setiile, that is that they cannot reproduce. The second one is queen, that is a diploid, and the third one is drone, that is also having n number of chromosomes. Now what happens? First we will take a male bee. Male bee is the drone, which is having n number of chromosomes. Now what will it do? It will go through mitosis and will produce a haploid sperm. Now what this sperm do? The queen will go through meiosis and it will produce 2 eggs that will have n number of chromosomes. Now once the egg and the sperm having n number of chromosomes will fertilize, they will form 2 n number of zygote. Now this zygote can develop into 2 categories. One is workers, which will form honey, and the second one is the queen, which will form the royal jelly. Now as I said that the queen will go through meiosis and will produce 2 eggs. So one egg will go for fertilization with sperm cell, but the second one will have no fertilization, and with parthenogenesis it will create a drone, that is a male bee. Parthenogenesis can be of 2 types. Number 1 is natural parthenogenesis and the another one is artificial parthenogenesis. In natural parthenogenesis, it is a part of reproduction in various organisms, while in artificial parthenogenesis, we ourselves artificially induce parthenogenesis in organisms. Natural parthenogenesis can be of 3 types: complete, incomplete, and pediogenetic. Now we come to disadvantages and advantages of parthenogenesis. Firstly, it is a very easy mode of reproduction as asexual reproduction is. Then rapid multiplication takes place, and as I have explained about honeybee reproduction, here you can see that when fertilization is taking place, 2 n number of chromosomes or the females are being born, while when parthenogenesis is taking place, the males are being born. So it is also a method of sex determination in some animals. Next, we can produce triploid or aneuploid chromosomal combination. This means that we can have different types of polyploidy. Polyploidy means we can have haploid and we have diploid organism of one organism. Like in honeybee, sperm and the ovums are producing 2 types of structures. When they are fertilizing, they are producing 2 n number of organisms, while when the egg is going through parthenogenesis, it is producing n number of organisms, that is the male. So we are having 2 types of different organisms. Disadvantages, obviously it is same as for asexual reproduction. There is no variation, thus there is no evolution. A very important conclusion comes through parthenogenesis. That is, we come to know that it is not necessary for an egg or ovum to fertilize with an egg to form a new individual. It can itself even produce a new individual. The only necessity is that we need to give a stimulus to it to start development. Now here I have given a brief of natural parthenogenesis and artificial parthenogenesis. Now as I said, the natural parthenogenesis can be classified into 3 categories: complete parthenogenesis, incomplete parthenogenesis, and pediogenetic parthenogenesis. In complete parthenogenesis, the parthenogenesis is the only mode of reproduction in the organism and only females are present. In incomplete parthenogenesis, both parthenogenesis and sexual reproduction takes place in the animal. Like in case of honeybees, both honeybees are going through fertilization also and parthenogenesis also. Then comes pediogenetic parthenogenesis. It is the type of parthenogenesis in which the larva is going through parthenogenesis and forming the new organism. Now we come to artificial parthenogenesis. Now artificial parthenogenesis can be carried out in two ways, either by physical stimuli or by chemical stimuli. That is, there is an egg, so we can either give it a chemical stimuli or we can give it a physical stimuli so that it can start development. Now chemical stimuli can be a chloroform, ether, alcohol, fatty acids, or maybe anything else. And physical stimuli can be temperature, pH change, electric shock, UV light, etc. Right? Now parthenogenesis can also be divided into three categories according to their gender. Like in Archaeotoki, only males are born. There is no female born through parthenogenesis. In Thalakotoki, only females are born through parthenogenesis. Next is Amphiotoki. In this, both male and females can be produced through parthenogenesis.